just going to be, talking a little bit about my kind of experiences in the world of pro wrestling and where I got my start and how I got into pro wrestling. Today is my presentation. Kind of where I ended up here. You can see in the middle, right there. New Japan Camp. This was last March, 2018. So, really awesome thing. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So how did I start? Started like most kids in front of their TV screens, watching WCW. That's why I was showing a lot of WCW wrestling earlier. It was one of the companies I could watch at the time. WWE was very like adult oriented during that time in like the 90s, like around 98, 99. So I wasn't allowed to watch it, especially on like Monday nights. Because I'm a little kid and just like, that time's like, whatever, like 8 o'clock, so, So these were just like some of the wrestlers from WCW I remember I grew up watching, and that kind of like inspired, kind of my career and kind of where I wanted to go with like my wrestling style a little bit. Ultimo Dragon, he was a cruiserweight wrestler in WCW. The Great Muta, and Sting, who both are former World Heavyweight Champions, and both people I really enjoyed watching as a kid, just remembering the face paint and the mysteriousness of their characters, and the whole storyline between Sting and Hulk Hogan and this whole, chase to kind of clean up, the company WCW, where Hogan was gathering wrestlers and paying them to kind of start this new kind of wrestling organization to rival all the WCW wrestlers. And Sting, a lot of people thought, he was going to defect and go to Hulk Hogan's group and be a part of that group. And, he was gone for about 6 months, and he came back in this kind of like Crow, Brandon Lee get up with the trench coat. He would show up in the rafters, and he'd just be watching over people's matches. And, this whole thing is like, whose side's he on? He's wearing black and white, and Hulk Hogan's group, they're like their colors in black and white. So they thought he was them, everything. So just a really elaborate storyline. They kind of dropped the ball with it, and they kind of let it go on for too long without really much of a resolution. But it was just something that was just like really like cool at the time, very like ingrained in our culture to this day. So, The Rock, I grew up watching The Rock a lot. But as I got older, around this time, 2001, 2002, WCW by that point was gone. WWE had purchased pretty much every major wrestling company at the time. So the big build-up was Hulk Hogan returning to face The Rock, who was one of the biggest draws, and he had already had like joined. He was already a part of Hollywood at that point, so he was already making movies. Like he just finished filming like The Scorpion King, which was kind of like a weird kind of like movie tie-in to like the Mummy trilogy of movies. So I remember going to the theaters and watching that, seeing The Rock, not being The Rock, which was just like, wow, you see where like these wrestlers, like especially The Rock, how they can project themselves and entertain people just outside of the realm of wrestling, and how they kind of take their characters and morph in what they learned. And, The Rock, he was just like a kid. He was like he played football. It didn't work out for him. And he, went on to, become a Hollywood actor. And me, I kind of wanted to go that route when I was younger. So I started acting classes when I was a little kid. And, I did a few episodes of like Law and Order as like an extra and stuff like that. So, but wrestling still kind of wasn't on my mind. Until I grew up, and I was around 13 years old, so past The Rock, past Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I went back, I started watching a lot of older stuff, and I really started like, hey, this is like what I want to do, this is the place I want to be when I grow up. I want to make a living doing professional wrestling. So where did I start? When did I really start in professional wrestling? Like a lot of people, when they first get into wrestling, it's really hard, especially when you don't know people. Thankfully, I knew somebody. My friend here, you see on the right side, Marcos. He's kind of like my baby brother almost. I knew him since I was like a little kid, you know, playing in the park, you know. And here, this is an event we went to. We were setting up the ring. You know, he knew a local promoter. His uncle was a professional wrestler for the WWF in the 80s. And he helped me get introduced to a wrestler named Joe Maximo. And we went to his wrestling school. And that's where I got my start training. This was the building the school was located in, right below a building supply store. A lot of funny different stories happened in this place. The first day we got there was a Saturday. There was an event going on, and you know the place was full. It was like 40 people, and this is so. You know, we hand our money, we do a little training, and we get ready for the show. And he asks us, hey, you know, we need people to film the show, and everybody's booked. You guys want to film? So of course we're like, oh, yeah, that's how you do it. You pay your dues in wrestling. You know, you start from setting up the ring, you know, filming, refereeing, doing all that, and you know, so filming the main event, and the camera starts to run low on battery, which is a bad thing. It's like, okay, well now, like, what's gonna happen? So I have to stop recording, run over, and thankfully somebody else was recording the rest of the match, so I had to run over, like, hey, the battery's running low. So I, you know, get the charger, plug it in, and I'm like by the entrance. I'm like sitting on top of the speaker, and like filming at a weird angle. I'm like right here, and like the ring is like 2 feet from me, so it's like I'm just like trying to like get the best angle I can, and just all sorts of chaos and mess. During one of the matches, somebody did an outside dive, and like again, a small little living room. We called it living room Ludus because the name of the school is the Ludus. So we call it living room Ludus, and like it's small. There's like about like 5 or 6 people where I'm standing behind, and like somebody does an outside dive to one of the wrestlers. The wrestlers catch them. They both fall backwards into everybody, and like there's like a big screen TV behind the curtain. The TV falls over onto Joelle, my trainer, his wife's foot, falls on top of her foot. You're screaming in the backstage, like behind the curtain. It was just a whole like big mess, and just a lot of fun memories and stuff in that place. You know, a few months later, actually, I guess I could talk here about the kind of the training we went through. I guess my first day. Conditioning, cardio, and strength training. 3 big things you need to kind of be a pro wrestler. You know, I'm 17 years old. Not really like into all like the strength training. Like, you know, I'm training. I'm doing martial arts, and I'm doing, you know, different things to keep myself in some sort of shape. But to be in pro wrestling shape, you have to be really, really strong. You know, and you're protecting, you're managing someone's weight. You do slams certain way or certain moves certain ways. You have to bring the person down in a controlled way. So you have to have the strength to, you know, lift up somebody who's like 250 pounds and like kind of like, you know, do certain moves to look impressive. So those are the things you really need to learn before you ever really step in the ring, is really making sure you're in that good condition to kind of keep yourself and your opponent safe. Of course, you learn that. You start rolling. Rolling is one of the basics in wrestling. You know, you do your front tumbles, your backflips, and all sorts of things. You progress from rolling into that. Depending on your style, if you're more of a bigger person, you're going to be doing backflips and cartwheels and all that. You know, it looks impressive, but most people like bigger than like me, like 6'3", 6'4", they're not really going to be doing all those sorts of crazy flips. Break falling, learning how to fall. I would demonstrate, but I'm not going to do that on the floor. Just learning to use your hands kind of to break falls. You learn how to fall forward, how to fall backward. It's helped me a lot in real situations where, like, one time I was riding my scooter and, like, I'd trip over, like, a stone or something, and I'm, like, flip forward and I fall flat on my back and I, like, slap my hands on the ground. Of course, slapping your hands on concrete hurts, but at least, I didn't, like, break my neck or anything like that. So, break falling and wrestling, they do have a real life application that it's really starting. Universal, another big basic thing you learn in wrestling, is just like a typical spot here is described: tackle, drop down, hip toss. You do it one more time. That's the beginning of like a basic match. Those are the kind of things you learn when you first get into wrestling, and you have your foundation, and that's kind of where you build it. And then of course you learn all your different moves, and that all comes with time. So I got my first match. The school had moved to another building. This is the address. It was in like a truck stop, little warehouse in the middle of like a docking area neighborhood, kind of industrial neighborhood. Of course, there's like houses and like apartments across the street. So our first like big like show there, we had like 400. We had at least 400, 500 people, with including like the additional 200 people that were sitting out on the street and on the porch, coming out and seeing our little gate open, and there's a ring. There's like a bunch of people cheering. This was my first match. A picture from my first match. I don't have the film, unfortunately, to show you. Thankfully, because your first match isn't your best. So, but this was really, really, stepping stone in my career. I was happy I finally got to step in the ring after about, this was like 2 or 3 years, and I was already here at Hampshire doing stuff, so I haven't been training in a while, so my match didn't kind of go so well. This is just a little history on like catch wrestling. Once I kind of left from that school, a lot of things happened. With the promoter, he wasn't paying certain people, and he had a lot of grudges. He was burning a lot of bridges, and so he wasn't doing very good business, and a lot of people left. So of course I left because I kind of didn't want to be a part of all that, drama. So I, started looking up more martial arts, more grappling, and I found out kind of about catch wrestling, which is like the original style where pro wrestling kind of came from in England. And these are just like the examples of the companies, not really too important, that kind of branched off and became MMA companies and into UFC and all that. Over here's a picture of Paul Gotch. He's kind of like the godfather of that style. And he's considered one of the innovative wrestlers he introduced pro wrestling in Japan. And he's demonstrating a submission hold. It's called a double wrist lock in wrestling, and it's still used today in grappling and legitimate fights in pro wrestling. And then just the integration again going into that. Where the split between wrestling and MMA kind of came, and how important it is kind of in my training in martial arts. Helped me a lot more now than back then, because coming into the business I was still young and I didn't know too much about the history, and that's kind of like a person coming into pro wrestling, it's important to learn a lot about the history and how to do certain moves. So where kind of like UFC and everything kind of came into fruition in the early 90s. And even before then, again, with the splitting of all the companies in Japan, it was kind of attributed to Karl Gotch. So, yeah. Let's see. So, we'll take a look here at my first match in another promotion, kind of my first match branching off and going in. This is my first kind of paid match here. So let's take a look at that here on YouTube. We'll skip the entrance because it's a little bit long. save on time. It's my opponent. His name was Jiggy Sosa. Just somebody I put in the ring with last minute. This was kind of like, we had like about an hour beforehand to go over a match. Went over it pretty well, but you'll see in a few, it didn't kind of go as planned. So I'm gonna let y'all watch that for a little bit, and I'll talk about it after. We just had an amazing time in California. It was really just like a privilege for me to go to a company I grew up kind of like being a fan of a lot of the wrestlers from, and you know, being an American and now Japanese wrestling kind of taking a more popular stance here in like America now and starting to gain an audience on its own. And you know, it was kind of like really an honor just to be a part of that whole that startup. Hopefully I get the opportunity to go back again after I graduate. I went to Japan in July. Yeah, in July I went to Japan. Again, where I went to Japan. So, again, going back to the history of catch wrestling, Japan has a lot of that rich history because of Karl Gotch and wrestlers like him going over and training all the different Japanese wrestlers, especially in New Japan wrestling. I got to train with one of his students, as well as he's one of Billy Robinson's also top students. Yuko Miyato is his name, Sensei Miyato. And you can see this is a picture of Billy Robinson. This is actually his chair where he sat. He passed away in 2014, and they leave that chair there with the picture of him, you know, kind of as like a memorial to him. And whenever wrestlers come in and to do workshops, you know, everybody always takes the group photo with the chair, because it's kind of like, you know, he's always there kind of in spirit with everybody training. So I got to go to, this is the Wrestle One dojo here in Shinjuku, Japan. This is, it's in a whole building, so these two shots are from the same building. This is the like MMA gym, and we're practicing like sprawling, you know, when you kind of like, I'll show you after this, yeah, these are just two of the rookie wrestlers training us. The cool thing about wrestling in Japan is it's not as restrictive. As long as you're really like an athlete, they really show emphasis on people who are athletes in Japan. And, you know, these people, you know, young people, old people, they come in and they train with the wrestlers. So it's, you know, it's a pretty common occurrence. Through that, I actually got to try out for Wrestle One in Japan. This was my first like foreign tryout overseas. Again, like another huge, you know, deal, huge honor for me. Kaz Hayashi, who has experienced wrestling in America and I've seen before on TV. Another person I was happy to meet. Me in the corner, and then we had a few other foreign wrestlers. And again, going back to like that training, you know, the strength training, the conditioning, it goes into being wrestling. Japanese tryouts, before they recruit you, they like to, you know, kind of like, they're known for stretching out that training and making you do all sorts of rigorous workouts, like, you know, 500 squats and like 300 push-ups and all that, you know, just like kind of just like really, really heavy workouts. And I went in expecting like, hey, I'm gonna like do like 300 squats and outdo everybody. And we only did like 100 squats and stuff. A very underwhelming kind of feeling, but still, again, like some very like, you know, I hold on to. So this was originally a contest for, it was a trial for a contract. Nobody got the contract, unfortunately, but the two young guys here in the front, they kind of They won, but they didn't like really win. But so yeah. Again, there's 3 other foreigners, and me and a gentleman from Italy and another guy from New Zealand, who I still talk to both of them to this day. And again, just like a really big part of my career. And starting, not being a part of any really wrestling school, but being able to impress even wrestlers overseas and being able to be seen by them helps me in a way, helps my image and, how other people view me and how I'll be able to, start to work and eventually, start wrestling full-time professionally. What's next? Who's next? As Goldberg used to say, this is a catchphrase. I really don't know right now. It's so unsure. I'm so unsure of where I'm going now. I really want to go back to Japan, just because I have such an amazing time and I made so many connections with other professionals out there. None of you guys, I haven't told anybody else this, but I actually went to a grappling tournament, so like a legitimate submission wrestling tournament. I won 3rd place in my division, and I'm really thinking about doing more in MMA now. Still being a part of wrestling because that will always be like my passion, but still continuing more with MMA and legitimate wrestling to build kind of my credibility in wrestling. So probably focusing more on that and eventually going back to full-time pro wrestling training and hopefully getting looked at eventually maybe by WWE, maybe New Japan, but I definitely want to go work for the companies in Japan that I really liked and grew up watching and tapes of. So yeah, that's all. If y'all got any questions, feel free to ask me any questions.
Is the MMA, is that a staged theatrical event, or do you get prizes for coming in 1st, 2nd, 3rd? How's that? Is that scripted?
Well, MMA is
it's mixed martial arts.
It's mixed martial arts. Punching, kicking, and wrestling as well. It is legitimate competition. It's really guys going into a cage or ring, and they're really beating. It's not out of each other. They're really trying to win, and the winner gets paid less, and the winner gets paid more, and the loser gets paid less. So So I'm doing a lot more MMA training now, just because it's also important for self-defense as well. And I do want to eventually go to Japan and compete in MMA over there as well.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, do pro wrestlers have to learn acting in any capacity?
Most wrestlers don't learn acting. It helps a lot, definitely. Like The Rock, I don't think he went to acting school until after professional wrestling, once he was done. I think he did have a theater. I'm not so sure, but I think he did have some sort of theater, maybe in college or high school. But he was mostly known for football player and then going into wrestling and stuff like that. So, but it helps a lot.
Can you tell us about the conversation between you and that wrestler? How does it go, and where does the script come from? Is just everything. Someone hands you a script, it's emailed, you go through it. What do you talk about? All of that.
Yeah. Matches are worked either the day of, or if you're in wrestling school and your school's doing something, then you'll have plenty of time to go over your match until the show. In my case, the guy I was working with, he kind of we talked a little bit and we worked it out, and then he kind of left. And then I was like, where the hell is he? The match is about to start. We gotta go over the finish and everything. So he kind of just ran out of me, whatever, but I won't talk about that anymore. Yeah, just going over the match, sometimes you don't get the chance to go over your match. Sometimes you just have to work it out in the ring. And that's kind of where I shine, because like I know like from wrestling for real and all that, and doing like collegiate wrestling and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, I kind of know the person's body. And as a professional wrestler, you kind of have to also know how to work without a script, because there'll be days where, hey, Joe didn't show up, you gotta wrestle somebody else, because you got 2 minutes before you have to go out. So you have to kind of work your match in the ring and calling it in the ring. And there are points in the match where I kind of like lean in a little bit, if you can tell or not, where I tell him like, hey, do this, and he'll either not do it or he'll like do something else. So kind of where I messed up and where we kind of like confused each other, just because we've never worked with each other before too. So I won't put 100% of the blame on my opponent or anything, but yeah.
What comes from above? Is it just you're gonna win, you're gonna lose, or like you're gonna win, you want this kind of move, you want this kind of finish?
In his case, because he's been with the company once before, and like I'm just coming in, like I'm going to lose, because maybe he's on a win streak, maybe he's going to fight for the belt or something. So they'll judge that based on whatever, on the popularity of the person, or the audience will gauge, if somebody's getting booed more. They'll have the other person go over, or they'll have me go over, depending. So.
But did they tell you, we want you to lose and we want you to lose this way?
Well, that's the important part of like the finish. Like every wrestler has their finisher. The Rock has, the Rock arm or the elbow, and Stone Cold has his stunner. And those are kind of like, if you have a finish, you tell the person your finish. The promoter tells you who's going to win or lose, and then you tell your opponent, hey, this is my finish. So, yeah. Have a question?
If they're gauging it by how the audience is reacting,
Yeah.
when do they tell the promoter to tell you who's gonna win?
Sometimes it's determined by like the referee, or like in bigger companies like in WWE where stuff like that's happened. Like the ref has like a radio, and everybody's sitting kind of by the entrance, like behind the little display setup they have there, like the Titantron's what it's called, with that little like stage display. Everybody's sitting there, so somebody will like feed to the referee, or somebody will tell the referee like, hey, tell this guy to go over instead.
And then the referee talks to them.
Yeah, the referee will tell the wrestlers, like, somebody will go in the corner, and while the ref is counting in the corner, while he's telling the guy to back up or something, he'll go to check on the guy and be like, oh, hey, you're going over now, or something, or hey, he's saying he's hurt, so you're winning, or something. Different means of kind of like changing the ending, and calling an audible kind of is what it's known as in wrestling.
What's your finisher?
I've never really determined that. That's probably why I haven't won any match. I originally wanted it to be like a front jawbreaker, which is...
What's that?
Luca.
Nope.
I won't do the actual move, I'll just do the motion.
I trust you, bro.
Yeah, it's kind of a move where you can have your head here, or you use your shoulder, and you just drop to your knees as the person's chin is on your shoulder.
Ooh.
They pop up, so it's kind of like a reverse Stone Cold Stunner or something like that. But I'm thinking about changing it, of course, because I think it's
You're going neck to neck,
too big.
as they say on the streets.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm still determined that. So. I have a lot of time to do that since I'm not actively wrestling. Further questions?
No.
That's a lot of knowledge.
Do you ever at a place like Hampshire have people like, question your desires and make light of it?
Maybe just because I don't tell a lot of people, or I don't know.
Other than your committee.
I feel like I'm very vocal about kind of like what I want to do with my life, you know, and wrestling and stuff like that. But you know, I've just had people kind of like not be really supportive. They're not necessarily not supportive. They're just kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool, you know, yeah, just kind of like brush it off as whatever. So I don't think anything of it. You know, I just do. It's just something I'm passionate about. I'm not going to let anybody else tell, you know, rely on anybody else's kind of input to, you know, direct where I'm going.
Did you ever know Bill Hurley in Northampton?
No.
He was like wrestling coach in Hampshire.
Yeah.
It was probably
Years ago.
maybe 10 years ago or so.
We had a wrestling team. I wish we still had a wrestling team.
Yeah. He's a fisherman, I know.
Yeah.
Remind me to tell you some stories.
No, but like the amateur wrestling is very like important to the foundation of most professional wrestlers. Just like wrestlers that are amateur wrestlers or grapplers, like they have much easier time understanding like the moves and stuff like that. So when I came into wrestling, I didn't practice much wrestling. I just knew like judo, and that was really it. So I kind of had some understanding. And from what I watched on TV, I had a little bit, but like I wasn't a grappler like an amateur wrestler, so I really didn't have. I had some trouble kind of like learning some things. So.
People get injured.
Now just because like moves are more high risks now, and a lot of people are more acrobat. Like a lot of people are lighter now than they were like back in, you know, the 90s and even early 2000s. So there's like a lot of injuries just because guys do more like flips and moves to try to make wrestling look more convincing too. Like people get hurt now, like just from like people getting kicked in the face, or so like people overshoot. And there are places on the body where you can hit and like not have to worry about, you know, getting concussed or anything, but sometimes it's just like. There was a case a couple weeks ago where one of the women's wrestler kind of like, she just straight up punched like another girl in the face and like knocked her out. So like stuff like that happens, and moves happen, and where people get like hurt and they get, you know, they have to retire because like, you know, they take a pile driver and their neck is like broken. So yeah, injuries are very common in wrestling, but there are also wrestlers that like they've never been seriously injured or hurt just because of how they keeping themselves safe, how they know how to keep themselves safe. So.
Would you say there's as much satisfaction from a perfectly executed defeat as there is from a perfectly executed victory?
Yeah. For wrestler, I mean, a lot of.
Let's say you and I wrestling,
Right.
and I executed perfect. You were gonna body slam me, and I hopped up. It didn't look like I hopped up. I just made it look like you dragged me up without hopping.
Yeah.
And did things perfectly in that defeat.
Right.
So you would somebody like me take as much satisfaction from that as you would from the victory.
Yeah. I mean, there are guys that are wrestlers that are literally, they're just there, you know, to be the loser. Like, and that's where you're playing a role, essentially, in wrestling.
Right.
So, you know, somebody's the loser, somebody's the winner. Yeah. Again, it all depends on popularity and charisma and all sorts of different things like that, you know. And there are just wrestlers that are like, hey, I just want to be like the guy that loses all the time. You know, I'm comfortable with just putting on, you know, a good, entertaining match. You know. Yeah. Definitely.
So what would you say the difference is? Like what kind of preparation would you need that's different from going into MMA versus going to a wrestling match?
It's all about the intention. I think sometimes people have trouble crossing the two. Like there are wrestlers now that are also professional MMA fighters, and it's kind of important to find that balance, to know when to be what, because you're like cross training or doing, you know, any type of thing. Like if you're in multiple professions, you know, like it's hard to, you know, hey, you're doing math over here, but you're also teaching English. You're teaching English in the math class sometimes. Like sometimes stuff will get, you know, people will get confused, or they'll not transfer stuff over, or they won't be as conditioned, because again, going into like fighting for real, and fighting as a form of just like, you know, theater or entertainment, like professional wrestlers do, like it's a totally different ball game, and you're preparing yourself for different things.
So did it take you longer to prepare for MMA, or you do the same thing, or it's just different?
It's different depending on the person. Like if you're going to go into MMA, like again, that's like another thing with like, you know, genetics, and if your body is like, if you're like pretty much born to be like in that kind of like realm, you know, because, you know, you have to deal with getting knocked out. You have to prepare yourself, you know, to be, you know, submitted, or, you know, to get your arm broken, stuff like that. So it's all different conditioning. You have to. There's also weight classes are more enforced in like MMA. So fighters have to lose weight, and that also affects how they perform. Because if I'm on Tuesday, if I'm 250 pounds and I have to drop to 220 by Friday for the weigh-ins, that's like, it affects your performance like very, very significantly in MMA, as opposed to wrestling where you really don't have to like drop weight if you don't want to. Any further questions? That's all. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Eli.
Thanks,
Thank
Eli.
you.
So you're halfway there. Just we get Monday, we get the